Last week, we did not just start a church, okay? We actually began a journey that's going to take us through the storyline of the Bible over the next several months, okay? And so I just want to be a community that's built on the foundation of the Bible and not on a personality of some leader, okay? And so we're going to follow the storyline of the Bible and see what God does. In fact, when we were planting the church, people were like, don't do the storyline of the Bible. It's bad news. It's not strategic enough. I'm like, okay, well, I think God told me to do it, so we're going to do it. And so the way that this is going to go so that you have some vision of the future is we've actually taken the storyline of the Bible. It's broken up into 31 weeks. Yes, 8 months, okay? Follow along. Come back, right? We're going to be in the Bible. And we've broken up the next 8 months into 6 series, 6 collection of talks. This first collection of talks is going to take us through the first 5 books of the Bible. And if you didn't know anything about the Bible, you're going to know a whole lot about the Bible in just the next 2 weeks, okay? Just the next 2 weeks. So this first collection of talks is called Hope for Everyone. Hope for everyone. And here's why. Because we believe that the God of the Bible is for everyone. Who's welcome at the Refinery? Everyone. Say it with me. Who's welcome here at this church? Everyone. God is for everyone. God is for everyone. And the more we get to know him personally, the more we get to experience hope, and hope makes its way and its home in our life. So hope for everyone. This week, what we're going to do is we're going to look at a husband and wife couple named Abraham and Isaac, okay? And their story actually begins in Genesis, the first book of the Bible, chapter 11, but we're going to pick up in Genesis chapter 12. So I want to tell you a couple things, and then we'll find ourselves in Genesis chapter 12. If you have a Bible app or a physical Bible, if you just brought your story Bible from last week, then you can actually just open up to chapter 2. I don't know what page it's on, but you'll find that we're right there on the first pages of chapter 2 of the story. If this is your first week, we gave out free Bibles last week that you can actually read to follow along in the story. And it's, again, broken up into 31 chapters. And we would love to just give it to you for free so that you can engage with God through the pages of the scriptures, okay? Now, if you came last week, we actually have a lot more Bibles. Last week, we were like only one per family. If you only got one per family, but there's like a couple of you adults in the family, take a Bible and we'll just buy more for the following weeks. Sound good? All right, it's our gift to you. This is where I pray, but we already prayed, so we're just gonna jump right in. Sound good? Growing up, it's like, it's game day, so I have to use a sports story from my own life, okay? So it's like mandatory. Growing up, I played all the sports, and I was never the best guy. In fact, I was never the best guy on my team. But I always made the team, and I always worked as hard as anybody else on the team. And so in my eighth grade year, I was on a traveling basketball team, which basically meant we were the best in our class in our city, and we would travel and play in tournaments against other really good teams in our state and in our region. And so we show up to this one tournament, and the rumor is that there are a couple of teams there who are like ranked as one of the top 1, 2, and 3 teams in our state. And so I grew up. Anybody heard of Lebanon, Oregon? That's what one, because you're from Oregon. You've heard of Lebanon, Oregon? Okay, you know nothing positive about Lebanon, Oregon, right? Okay, right? So you got a bunch of white farm boys playing basketball against the top 1, 2, and 3 teams in our state. We're intimidated, right? We're intimidated. But we're getting jacked. We're getting ready to go. And we have to play against the second-ranked team in our state, okay? And so we're like getting ready, I guess. But we know we're going to lose. And so the way my team was divided, the way our coach ran our team was like the top 5 guys, they get to start, and then the other 5 guys, they get to sit on the bench. And when those starters get tired, then the bench guys go in to give them a rest, and then when they get their wind back, then the bench guys go back to their positions in the chairs, and the starters go back in. Well, I was not one of the starters, okay? I was on the bench. So there we are at Willamette University playing the top, second-ranked, highest-ranked team in our state. And, of course, the 5 best players on our team start the game. And normally, by like minute 6 or 7, the 5 of us go in so that they can get that last minute of rest and plus the quarter break, the break during the quarter, and they can start the second quarter, right? That's how much playing time this guy got, okay? And so the first quarter comes and goes, and the bench guys we don't get into the game, right? We don't get to play the first quarter. So of course we're thinking, oh yeah, we're going to start the second quarter. We're getting jacked up, and he puts the 5 starters back in during the second quarter. And so, of course, we're thinking, okay, so we must be going in and, minute 3, minute 4, minute 5 of an 8-minute quarter. And the second quarter comes and it goes, and now it's halftime. And we haven't got to play yet. Right? And so the third quarter, it starts. The 5 guys, they play. That comes and goes. And by this point in the game, we're starting to realize it's a real possibility. I mean, we're like, let me just tell you, we're like, now there was 12,000 people in Lebanon, Oregon. So when I say that I was one of the best athletes in the city, I'm not saying much. But you got like the top 10 basketball players in the city. We've never not played in a game. But it becomes a real possibility. And of course, the coach never puts us in. And this messes with us. It messes with me. Man, I don't have what it takes. I don't have the value. I don't have the skill to help and contribute to my team's success, right? I wonder if you've ever felt that way before. Right? I don't have what it takes. I'm not good enough. I'm not skilled enough. I'm not relational enough. I'm not intentional enough. Maybe you had a dream or a vision of your future, but a parent or teacher told you that it's not realistic for you. Or maybe you failed once or twice and fear actually held you back from trying again. Or because the path towards your goal and your destination was actually really difficult, you've become convinced to play it safe. And maybe it was your teacher, maybe it was as a part of a team, maybe it was a school project, maybe it was at work, but at some point in your life, you're like, man, I just don't have what it takes to live out my vision for my life. I can't really do the significant work I think God would have me do if I were to pursue it. Most of us, we were born with a wild imagination of what could be, right? Most of us were born with the idea that, hey, my life can actually matter in the world around us. We're born with this innate desire to make a meaningful and purposeful difference in our world. But at some point, we tend to back off of that. For many of us, somewhere along the line, while giving it our best effort towards living a purposeful and meaningful life, our coach doesn't put us in the game. Our name doesn't make the list. We don't get asked to prom. We're not called upon. We didn't get the promotion that we thought we deserved. And someone else's criticism in a moment actually became the truth that we believed about ourselves for far too long. What's amazing about God is that He often chooses the most unlikely people to accomplish His most extraordinary purposes. It's the main point of this talk. God often chooses the most ordinary people like you and me to accomplish extraordinary purposes in His story, in His kingdom. Last week, we looked at the opening section of the Bible where God makes everything and then initiates this human-divine relationship with the very first humans, Adam and Eve. And for a moment of time, things are beautiful. Things are going really, really well. But then Adam and Eve, they turn their back on God, and this human-divine relationship is fractured. And this disobedience and distrust actually continues throughout human history. And we're actually jumping over two major events in the Bible. And you can read about those in chapter 1 of the story. The first major event that happens is about a guy by the name of Noah who has a family. And God is disappointed in human condition. And so he causes this great flood to come about. And Noah builds this boat, and his family is spared from the judgment of God. The second one is a story about a tower called Babel or Babel. And it's where the human race actually attempt to make a name for themselves after seeing what humans are capable of. God actually displaces the human race and gives them brand new languages. Okay? And despite the distrust and the self-reliance of humanity, God does not give up on his vision to have a relationship or pursue his vision to have a relationship with the humans that he created. So he decides that the best way to pursue this vision is actually to create a brand new nation, a special, like-minded people group who are as interested in getting to know God as much as God is interested in getting to know them. And that's where we meet Abraham and Sarah. Genesis chapter 12, beginning in verse 1, and here's how it reads. It should pop up here on the screen for us. The Lord had said to Abram, go from your country, your people, and your father's house to the land that I will show you. I will make you into a great nation. I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. Okay, how many of you in this room right now want to be a blessing to your neighbors? Okay, I want to be a blessing to my neighbors. Okay, I want to be a blessing to Alamos Elementary School. Okay, I want to be a blessing. God says to Abram, hey, you're going to be a blessing. I'm going to bless those who bless you, but whoever curses you, whoever attacks you, man, I'm going to curse them. And all people on earth will be blessed through you. So Abram went as the Lord told him. And Abram was 75 years old when he set out from Haran, which is east of Israel, very far east of Israel. Now, God chose Abram and Sarai, whose names he would eventually change to Abraham and Sarah. So that's why the confusion a bit as I read. And I'll refer to them as Abraham and Sarai for the remainder of the sermon. And he chooses Abraham and Sarah to be the human parents of this brand new, special people of God, or this brand new nation. And here's why he does it. Because God chooses ordinary people to accomplish extraordinary purposes. There's nothing special about Abraham and Sarah. In fact, they're very normal. In fact, I would argue that they're considered unlikely and bad candidates to begin this brand new nation for God for at least 4 reasons. And what we'll do for the remainder of this talk is I'll give you those 4 reasons, and it will outline this talk, and it will give us some insight into what kinds of people God chooses for his extraordinary purposes, okay? All right. Number 1, if you're taking notes, and I always encourage you to take notes, that means you can bring a journal or an iPad to church. You can even open up the notes app on your phone and punch these notes in so that you can recall them later. Number 1, God chooses the unspiritual. God chooses the unspiritual, okay? Joshua summarizes the spiritual condition of Abraham and Sarah in Joshua chapter 24. It says this: "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. Long ago, your ancestors, including Terah, the father of Abraham and Nahor, Nahor's Abraham's brother, they lived beyond the Euphrates River, and they worshipped other gods. But I took your father Abraham from the land beyond the Euphrates and led him throughout Canaan," which is now Israel, "and gave him many descendants." Now, when God chooses Abraham and Sarah, They actually live in a time and place that worshiped many different gods. And each god demanded specific sacrifices to meet the demands of specific requirements of life. And this was likely Abraham and Sarah's lifestyle as well. They may not have been completely unspiritual, but they were certainly disconnected from the God of the Bible. Now, sometimes we can allow our spiritual or unspiritual past hold us back from saying yes to God. Have you ever been there? I've certainly been there a time or two. I'm just not spiritual enough. Early on in the process of building what we called a launch team here in Southern California, we met a couple named Christine and Austin. Beautiful young family at one of our interest parties. So we would show up at a coffee shop, buy people's coffee, and tell them about our church and say, hey, you should come do this with us. And of course, Christine comes up to Amy and I after one of these interest parties, and I've summarized this statement, this question, and she says, hey, we're new to faith. Is there a way that we can still help out? Or are you looking for people who are more spiritual than we are? And I said, hey, you know what? I think one of the best ways to try following Jesus is to help start a brand new church. And of course, they joined our team. And they've been a significant part of what we've been able to build, to accomplish. In fact, Austin in March gave his life to Christ and got baptized at Easter at our pop-up service just across the street at Rancho Bella Vista Park. Listen, they weren't unspiritual, but they were at the beginning of the journey of faith. And while it would have been easy for them to say, hey, we have not arrived yet, so we just can't say yes to God, they did not allow that to remain a barrier to saying yes to God. They said yes to God. We're all on a spiritual journey, and no matter whether you're at the beginning of your spiritual journey or you've been following Jesus for many years, listen, there's a place for you here, and there's a place for you in God's kingdom. Listen, whether you're spiritual or unspiritual, God has an assignment for you. God has an assignment for you, a beautiful assignment. God chooses the unspiritual. Number 2, God chooses the unknown. God chooses the unknown. Hebrews chapter 11. Hebrews is a New Testament book of the Bible. And it says this, by faith Abraham made his home in the promised land like a stranger in a foreign country. Now, if I'm the decision maker and I'm playing God, I'm thinking, man, I'm going to maximize Abraham and Sarah's relationship with their friends and family in Haran to build my brand new special nation. But it's just like God to put the odds against him so that when things come to fruition, you can't take credit for it. You can only point to God, who is the maker of the heavens and the earth. And that's exactly what happens. He sends them to an unknown place to make his name known. Can I just say that just because you feel unknown, you are not unseen? Can I just encourage you for a moment? Just because you feel unknown doesn't mean you are unseen. You may not be the most influential. You may not be the most popular. You may not have the most followers on Instagram, but God has set aside a special work for you. Right? And unless God shows up, it made sense for Amy and I. Some of you know our story, but I've been a pastor pretty much my whole adult life. Now, and God started to give Amy and I this vision of starting a brand new church. And we lived in Vancouver, Washington, which is like 1,012 miles north on I-5 from here, okay? And So of course, we're thinking, we have 20 years worth of trust and community that we've built. We own a nice house in a cul-de-sac. Our kids have these beautiful relationships. When we start this new church, we're going to have some really great community and resources to pull from because we're going to start that church right here, and God's going to maximize our relationships to make his name known right here in Clark County, Washington. So what does God do? God highlights this town we've never heard of called Temecula, and we feel compelled to go and visit this little suburb of Southern California, and all of a sudden, God gives us a heart for the people. God paints us a picture of what our future could be here. And so, of course, we begin to share that with people that we trust. And to a person, they're like, yeah, God does this kind of thing all the time. And so while we could have had a great community and continued to have influence in our community, God said, hey, I want you to go and be strangers in an unknown place, and I want you to make my name known. Right? I will say this. There are parts of Southern California that make it easy to say yes to God when he says, hey, move to paradise. But it's really hard when you have to sign your name on a contract that says you can have my house. It's really hard to say yes to God when you have to tell your kids you're going to have to make new friends. It's really hard when you're loading up a U-Haul with your best friends and you have to give them a hug. Some of you know that. Some of you know this experience because you're new to the community, right? God chooses the unknown to make his name known. He chooses the unknown to make his name known. Number 3, God chooses the unqualified. God chooses the unqualified. I love this description of Abraham and Sarah's qualifications to be used by God. It says this, against all hope. That's a good start. Can you imagine God starting the story of your life against all hope? And you're like, I don't know if I want to live that story, Against all hope, Abraham in hope believed, and so became the father of many nations, just as had been said to him, so shall your offspring be. Without weakening in his faith, he faced the fact that his body was as good as dead. That's the Bible. Since he was about 100 years old, and that Sarah's womb was also dead. What made them qualified to be used of God? Nothing. They were bad candidates. See, when God chooses Abraham and Sarah to be the parents of this special nation, Abraham was actually 75 years old at the beginning, and Sarah was 65 years old, way past the prime of parenting. And they were childless, and it was medically impossible for Sarah to have children at all. Now, I want to step back for a moment, and I want to acknowledge that there's probably some folks in this room right now who are experiencing or have experienced the pain of not having children that you so desperately want. I don't want to paint over that. I don't want to paint over that. Having a vision of a family, having a picture of wanting to care for your own flesh and blood, that's painful. And so today, what I would love to do, and I can't control God's miraculous healing, but you know what? My wife and I, we want to pray for you today. We want to pray for you today. So after the gathering, would you come up? Would you let us know, hey, I want to have kids, and we've been unable to share that story with us. We want to pray for emotional healing, and we want to pray for physical healing. God still does that stuff. God still does that stuff. In our world, we often look at skill sets and training and experiences, credentials, and degrees as a way to gauge whether or not a person will make a valuable contribution towards our goals, right? And so in our human wisdom, what we'll do is we'll invite those who are most qualified and most experienced to join our team as a way to make sure that we're successful. And so what we do is if we don't have the highest qualifications, or if we don't perform up to this whatever standard is necessary, then we feel like God can't really use us. I don't have the qualifications required for me to be used of God, right? You may have thought, man, I don't have enough experience. I don't have the right skin color. My past is too messy. I don't have the resources enough. I'm not outgoing enough. I'm not spiritual enough. I'm too fat. I'm too skinny. I'm not smart enough. If you've ever thought any of those things, any of those phrases, any of those lies, you're qualified to be used of God. You're qualified. In God's economy, qualifications and credentials have little value when it comes to accomplishing His mission. In fact, I've heard it said, and I believe it's truth, God does not invite the qualified. He qualifies those He invites. Listen, this morning, you're invited. I don't know what you're invited to. I've been praying that you would hear the voice of God this morning. You're qualified because you've been invited. God chooses the unqualified to do significant things in His kingdom. Number 4, God chooses the unperfect. I feel like this is like a George W. Bush moment where like we just make up words, you know? No, I don't. Anyway, I don't know. I just wrote, I'm like, I need an unword. Imperfect isn't going to work. I need them to remember it. So unperfect. I'll do stuff like this because I'm a nerd and because it helps us remember, okay? As we follow along in Abraham and Sarah's story, it becomes clear that God works in the face of imperfection and imperfect faith. Or should I say unperfect, right? At one point in their journey towards God's future for their life, Abraham and Sarah, they actually traveled to Egypt. And because Sarah's beautiful, the Bible says, hey, she's really pretty, Abraham gets scared that someone might kill him to steal his wife. Okay? So this is a real fear, apparently. And so he devises this plan to tell anyone who asks that his wife is actually his sister. And rather than protecting his wife, he protects himself and he actually gives Sarah over to be married to another man. Right? That's the unperfection of Abraham that qualifies him to be used of God. I don't think we should go chasing those kinds of things, but hey, this is the father of our faith, giving his wife to be married to another man. Crazy. At another point, after waiting 10 years for God's promised son, Abraham and Sarah, they actually take matters into their own hands, and Sarah encourages Abraham to have sexual intercourse with one of their housekeepers named Hagar. Like, these people are the father and mother of our faith? Guess what Abraham does? He does it, and Hagar gets pregnant, and things get really complicated and really messy really, really fast. Okay? This is unperfect. And then 1 year before Isaac is born, Isaac then becomes Abraham and Sarah's real promised son. Sarah actually laughs at God showing up and telling her, hey, in 1 year, you're going to actually have a baby. And she laughs in God's face as a way to communicate, I don't believe you. This is the unperfection that qualifies Abraham and Sarah to be used of God. What do we learn? We learn that our unperfect life and our unperfect faith do not disqualify us from being used of God to accomplish really meaningful purposes in this world. I don't know about you, but like, I'm unperfect. I don't even know how to spell imperfect. I don't know what your imperfections are. I don't know what imperfections you're battling in your own life, but I love this beautiful promise in the Bible. It's given me a lot of hope over the years as I follow after Jesus. And this is not going to show up on the screen, but it says this. This is the Apostle Paul, the writer of much of the New Testament section of the Bible. And it says this. He says, I pleaded 3 times. I pleaded with the Lord to take away this thorn or this weakness in my flesh. But God said to me, my grace is sufficient for you. In fact, my power is made perfect in your weakness. Therefore, Paul says, I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses so that the power of Jesus may rest on me. This is how the God of the Bible often works. He gives you skills. He gives you gifts. He gives you talents. He gives you a personality. He wants you to use those things. But he does not want you to rely on those things. Right? He wants you to rely on him. He wants me to trust him. He wants us to trust him. He wants us to trust him. Your imperfections do not scare God. Your weaknesses only qualify you for God's grace and power to show up in your life. Okay? God chooses the ordinary people like you and me. He chooses the unspiritual. He chooses the unknown. He chooses the unqualified. He chooses the unperfect to accomplish extraordinary purposes in his story. And so when Abraham is considered the father of our faith, the only thing that really qualifies him to be used of God is his trust in God, his faith, right? Against all hope, Abraham in hope believed. That's it. That's it. So what I want to do, Jose, you can come on up. What I want to do is the remainder of this time is I want to take a few minutes right now, and I want to invite you to some sweet silence. I want to invite you into some sweet silence. I have an idea of what I could share right now that would be meaningful, but I want to invite God to speak, and I feel like God wants to speak to some of us today. And so Jose is going to play, and I'm going to ask you to ask God some questions, and then do your best to listen to what happens in your thoughts and in your heart, okay? Jose, you want to start playing? So I'm going to invite you to close your eyes for a moment. I don't want to be a normal church. I want to be a church that chases after the presence and power of God. I want to be a church that listens for the voice of God and does what the voice of God tells us to do. I want to be a church that takes risks, relational risks, spiritual risks. I want to be a church that leans into awkwardness because awkwardness is where we grow, okay? I just want you to ask God, would you speak to me right now? Just ask him. Say, hey, God, would you speak to me right now? There's a character in the Bible named Samuel, and the first time he hears the voice of God, he says, speak, Lord, your servant is listening. So I just want you to say that prayer. Speak, Lord, your servant is listening. Speak, Lord, your servant is listening. The goal of this time is to hear the voice of God and then to simply say yes to him. I want you to ask God to give you a picture of what purposes or what assignment is in your future? I don't want this to get weird. It doesn't have to be, the President of the United States or anything like that. It could be something small, like I want you to create quiet moments in the morning to spend time with me. It might mean, God might say something like, I want you to follow along in the storyline of the Bible with the Refinery Church. God might say, I want you to write some music. God might say, I want you to take a risk and join a ministry team at the church. God might say, I want you to cut off this relationship for a season of time because it's damaging your emotional health. Speak, Lord, your servant is listening. God, give us a vision of your assignment for our life in this moment. Abraham said yes. I want to be a yes-shaped church. I want to live a yes-shaped life. I want my relationship with God to be shaped by my yes. Speak, Lord, your servant is listening. Okay. When you sense that the Lord has spoken, how do you know that God has spoken to you? You don't. You don't know until you do what you think he told you to do. So if you're like, well, was that God? I don't know. Go do it and see what happens. Go do it and see what happens. We're practicing our faith. If doctors can practice, I can practice, right? I don't have to get it all right. We're all practicing. We're just trying to practice the way of Jesus right here in the valley. It's beautiful. It's a relationship. It's dynamic. It's complex. I'm going to say one thing. I don't know what the Lord said, but I want to encourage you to do it. But I want to encourage you to tell somebody. I want to encourage you to tell somebody, hey, this is what I think the Lord told me to do. And then I want you to encourage each other to go do it and respond in a way that says yes to God, okay? I'm going to just communicate just a need at our church is this. And it doesn't obligate anyone to do this. I don't want to ever make anybody feel manipulated or guilty or shameful for not doing certain things. But I want to make you guys aware. You're here at the Refinery Church. We have a team of about 30 to 40 people who serve every single week on their day off, okay? And many of those people actually serve throughout the week in order to make Sundays happen the way that they should, okay? So here, one of the goals of this morning is that there would be some of you to say yes to God and join one of the ministry teams, okay? And the reason we're asking you to do this is because we don't want to burn anyone out. The 40 individuals on our team, they are serving faithfully and with great joy, by the way. There is no complaining. But as a steward of this body, I recognize, hey, they're serving on their day off. Some of these people are actually working 6 days, and then they're serving on the 7th day, and they're not actually getting any kind of rest. So what we want to do is we want to add more people to our ministry teams so that we can rotate folks on and off over the course of the weeks and the months to come. Okay, so like our setup team, they show up at between 6:30 and 7, and those guys are showing up every week. And if you can imagine, this is our 6th week. They're getting a little bit tired, and I just want somebody here and over the next couple weeks to say, hey, I want to give those guys a gift. I want to join that team once or twice a month to give those guys a break. And then we have our children's ministry. We have production stuff. We have Our spiritual growth team is responsible for all the greeting and the follow-up and the groups to come, and there are places to serve. And here are 4 things that happen when we say yes to God in an environment like the Refinery, okay? Number 1, you're going to get connected, okay? A lot of us are here because we're like, man, I'm new to the area. I want to feel connected. So you're going to get connected if you join a team. Number 2, you're going to grow in your faith. That just when you serve, there's just no other. There's a dynamic to serving and contributing that actually causes you to grow in your faith. Okay. So, and number 3, you get to practice your gifts, and I would say discover your gifts. Right. When you apply in a volunteer role, you get to practice your gifts. You get to serve. You get to learn. You get to rub up against people, and people get to watch you and say, "Wow, you know what? You're really gifted in this area. I know that you're serving in this area, but I think, man, have you ever thought about serving in this way? I think that you could really make a big difference over here." And you get to learn your gifts and discover your gifts and that sort of thing. And then number 4. You get to help other people experience God. We exist to help everyone experience God every day. And when you say yes to God and you begin serving in a capacity like the church, you get to actually create environments that help people experience God. And we don't just do that right here. We're actually doing that in 3 classrooms in the school to help kids experience God. Okay? So I share that with you just to kind of let you know, hey, and just fun fact, okay? We want to be a blessing to the school. So what we've determined is that everybody who joins our volunteer team, we're just going to make a free $10 donation to the school for their integrity initiative, which basically catches students making good choices, right? And we're sponsoring that, okay? So the way you can do that is you can obviously fill out the card and check, hey, I want to volunteer, and our team will follow up with you this week, okay, to help you get connected. And when you sign up, by the way, we ask, hey, what are you interested in? We give you a 3-week trial, and then if it sucks and you hate it, then you're like, hey, peace out. You know, I did my 3 weeks or whatever, okay? Let me say this. I'm gonna end with this. When Abraham was 100, and Sarah was 99, they finally had their promised son, Isaac. And at some point early on in Isaac's life, God asks Abraham to sacrifice his one and only son. I mean, that's crazy. That's crazy to me. And here's how Hebrews describes this situation. It says this: by faith, when God tested him, offered Isaac as a sacrifice, he who embraced the promise of God was about to sacrifice his one and only son, even though God had said to him, "It is through this son Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned." And here's the kicker: Abraham reasoned that God could even raise the dead. And so in a manner of speaking, he did receive Isaac back from the dead. What happened was the scene is set, and Abraham is about to do what God asked him to do, but God says, stop. And he provides a ram in place of Isaac so that the sacrifice can still take place. Okay? And this is a beautiful foreshadow of what was to come. Because on that very same hill, 2,000 years later, God in his love would send his one and only son, Jesus Christ, who would willingly give his life on a cross for the forgiveness of all sins, of all people, everywhere. And those of us who put our trust in him get to have a relationship with God, and we get to discover our gifts, and we get to hear from God, and we get to say yes to him, and we get to follow him, and we get to practice, right? So I'm going to ask you to bow your heads for a moment as we close. And And if you're here this morning and you sensed that God spoke to you, or you're guessing that you heard something or you felt something and you think, man, that might have been God, would you just raise your hand like, hey, I think God spoke to me? Would you raise your hand just for a moment? Just for a moment. Awesome. Okay. How many in here are you're like, man, I didn't really hear the voice of God, or I don't know if I heard the voice of God, but I want to say yes to God when I hear him? Would you raise your hand? I want to say yes to God. Very cool. Very cool. This morning, if you're here and you want to begin a relationship with Jesus for the very first time, you for whatever reason, you believe that Jesus Christ died for your sin, and you want to begin that relationship, I want you to, on a count of 3, raise your hand, and I want to pray for you. I'm not going to embarrass you. I'm not going to ask for you to come up front. I just want to pray for you, and then we have a gift for you today. So if you're here and you want to begin a brand new relationship with God, would you raise your hand on the count of 3? 1, 2, 3. Shoot it up. Shoot it up. Awesome. Amazing. Okay, 3 people just raise their hands. Can we give them a round of applause? Okay. That's amazing. Okay. We have a gift for the 3 of you, and we want to pray for you. And then I don't want to forget, for those of you who have had a difficult time conceiving children, and have experienced some emotional pain and would love to be healed of that. Again, I can't promise healing, but we would love to seek God and ask him to heal you. Make sure you come forward and we'll pray for you. Father, why don't you stand up, and we'll pray. Join me in this prayer. Just repeat after me. God, we love you. I give my life to you today, and we receive your Spirit. We receive your forgiveness, and we ask that you would help me say yes to you every day. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. Give those 3 a round of applause. All right, you can be seated.
Before we close out our gathering, I am going to, Manny is celebrating because the mic worked on the first time. Really excited about that. I'm going to respond out of obedience. I really had felt this prompting, and I'm going to take a risk. Babe, the whole time you were talking, I really was hoping, or I was going to ask you if you would share your salvation story. I feel like in this moment, there's an opportunity for you to share how God worked in your life and where he led you. So would you be okay with that?
Yeah, really, we're supposed to end church, but yeah, I'll totally do that. You're going to get embarrassed. Today, there's a special guest here today, and you're going to hear me over and over and over again say the name Adam Sawney. And when I was, again, I did not grow up going to church. And when I was a junior in high school, totally lost, totally disconnected from God. One of my teammates, Adam Sawney, invited me to come to church with him for their youth group grand opening. And I didn't even know what youth group was. And so, of course, I'm like, he's a cool dude, and I really want to build a friendship with him. And so I said, yeah. And we would go to youth group. We would go to practice because we played football together, and then we would go shower. He would pick me up in his car, and then we would drive across town 30 minutes to go to youth group. And this happened for 6 or 8 months or something like this. And we would stop at Wendy's for Frosty and fries, because that's what high school students do after church. And we would be idiots on the way home. This one particular night, I remember it literally like it's yesterday. You've never heard this story. This is his wife. Adam, come here. This is Adam Sawney. Yeah, you don't even know yet. And this one particular night, we're 16 years old, and we're in the car. We're normally idiots, okay? This night, it's completely silent in the car, okay? Super weird. And we're like 2 minutes from my house. Mind you, we've been in the car for 28 minutes, okay, driving across town. And This is funny that I've never told this story to you from my point of view. He goes, hey, Casey, do you do you believe that Jesus Christ died for your sin? And I was like, yeah, I do. And I had this weird confidence that night that, yeah, that was true. And then he goes, well, do you believe that Jesus Christ died on the cross for your sin? And I was like, yeah. And he said, do you want to become a Christian? Which was confusing to me because I'm American and I believed in God, so of course I'm a Christian. But if I'm not, then yes, I want to be a Christian. And then he said, well, there's a prayer that we need to say now, but I don't know it, so we'll say it later. Do you remember this? 16-year-old, right? The 16-year-old evangelism. And I was like, okay, didn't think anything of it. So a week or two goes by, and we're at church together, and they're offering a class called Discovery 101 for high school kids. And I'm like, that sounds lame. And Adam goes, hey, you really need to go to that. And I'm thinking, now looking back, I'm like, he probably's like, they know the prayer. They know the prayer. So if I get him to go to that, he'll say the prayer. And I was like, I'm not going to that. And he goes, I think there's free food, and I'll go with you. I'm like, I'm in, right? I'm in. And of course, they lead me in the prayer. Now, I want to tell you this. I don't think, and he wouldn't say this either now, looking back, but there's no magic in the prayer. It's just a symbol of what God has already done inside of you. And so when we stand up and we say that prayer together, it just symbolizes the work of God in your life, okay? So this is Adam Sani. He lives in San Diego. I called him a couple weeks ago, and I was like, hey, we're launching a church, and you're at fault, right? It's your fault that we're doing this. So you're going to hear stories of Adam Sani over and over and over and over again. And I just want to tell you, dude, thank you for taking the risk to invite me to church and share the gospel, even though it was super awkward. It's changed my life. It's changed my life. It's changed my life. This was unplanned.
Yeah, can I sit down?
I love you. Yeah, go sit down. Go sit down. Oh.
Thank you. Thank you for doing that. And thank you for letting him embarrass you, Adam. We love you. Okay. Now let's close. Let's be done. Let's go party. Before we do, each and every one of you have a response card on your chair. And this is the time I want to give you an opportunity. We want to help you take your next steps here with this family at the Refinery. And so a couple things I want to highlight. If you want to follow through and get on one of our teams, please mark that space on here. And then if you want to get baptized, make sure you mark that so we can follow up with you. One of the other ways that we respond here at the Refinery is through giving. There is a QR code. Forgot what that was called. QR code on the screen is one of our ways that we respond. So if you did come prepared to give this morning, you can do that. You can also, we have a giving box as you exit, or you can text any amount to 84321. We thank you for being here, and we thank you for investing in what God is doing here through the Refinery. Now let's go party.